and this is why nobody has totally cracked it. You either have insider information, in which case you've totally cracked it, or it's all based on sentiment. That's what the analysts always call
emotion.
It. Sentiment. What do people feel about something? So if somebody doesn't like a CEO, that will affect the price. If somebody thinks a car is pretty, that will affect the price. But a pretty car may sell more, which actually affects the I don't know. I do a lot of financial stuff. I'm sure this stuff makes no sense or perfect sense. It's kind of silly stuff. Now I need to find a place to put this lens cap. I'll be right back.
In the
kitchen drawer. Yeah, the junk drawer in the kitchen. That's its natural habitat.
They like mines.
We don't have a junk drawer. We have a drawer.
Well, there is another place you could put it, on the lens when you're not using it.
I put them underneath the lens. I try to lie them flat on whatever surface the thing is on. Now, that doesn't work if you're on a tripod, but like this rig, I've got a little 3-inch tripod under it, so I just lay the lens cap right there.
And I put the puffer right on top of it, just so I'm got it covered.
Speaking of dust, my teleprompter monitor is filthy. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had to clean mine.
Man, I'm embarrassed for myself. Is it an Osmo bag or is it a lens cloth?
It's both.
You be the judge. I want to draw your attention to a note from Chad in panel chat. If you must use the question notes, make sure we know where they're coming from.
All righty. That's a good tip.
I would suggest that the notes, I know it's a little back baseball, whatever, that generally the notes are for the QM.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever day part you're in around the world. Welcome to Office Hours. It's great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget you can find out more about what we do on officehours.global. Our first hour is a general discussion of production and IT related topics where we answer audience submitted questions. Second hour, typically a deeper dive into a topic. And we're looking forward to today. Mick of Clippn will help us understand that product. It's a cloud-based system for cataloging and managing footage. Should be a fascinating discussion. So stick around for that. But right now, it's time to dive into our questions for today. Mitch, what have we got?
Thank you, Bill. Starting out with Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. Tobias asked, has anyone used Descript's new workflow for editing video and video podcasts? Can you offer a review?
So far, nobody appears to have here on the panel. I've heard that name over and over again. So I think you probably have to check what it said on there. John Preto may have some thoughts. So, John?
We're playing with it right now. In order to get all the cool features, you have to pay this subscription, and then you have to train it. You have to read a bunch of paragraphs in there. But for eliminating ahs and ums and stuff like that, it looks really, really powerful. I'm watching it closely.
So is it kind of an auto translator for taking spoken word and turning it into written text? Is that its basic function?
It's a script-based editor. So,
oh, yeah. Okay. So it's a little bit like some of the other ones that are out there in terms of you write a script and edit the script, and that in turn edits the video. Okay. Chris, what do you think?
Exactly what I was going to say. Same thing. It's a little bit like Lumberjack. It's script-based editing. So you can literally just like copy paragraphs from one side to the other and it'll assemble it. But it also has some of the other things like what John was saying. You can erase words and stuff. I haven't used it. I know a few people that use it and they swear by it.
Okay. Well, so it'll be interesting. Maybe we'll have them on or try to figure out a day that we take a closer look at it. It sounds like a fascinating concept. Let's go on to the next question for right now.
Andy Kotgendorfer from Vieira, Florida, asking, I need to record a 4-person podcast interview. Is there a mix pre with 4 channels of noise assist?
Chris Fenwick.
That sounds like it would be really cool, Andy. No. The way it works, at least, and all I can really speak of from legitimate experience is I have a mix pre 6. So the way it works is you choose which channel you want to apply the noise assist to. Now I'm using noise assist on my mic, and I've picked input 1 and applied the noise assist to that channel. But you can also take your noise assist and apply it to a bus. So you could say, apply noise assist to everything on the left channel. You can then stereo pan all of your mics. And because when you hit record, you're going to get an ISO of every individual channel, plus you're going to get the left channel, plus you're going to get the right channel, all recorded all at once, or anything that you've enabled. You then have your 4 mics raw. You have your 4 mics mixed and noise assisted on the left, and then you have your 4 mics mixed but unnoise assisted on the right. That's the way Sound Devices kind of expects you to use it when there's more than one person that you want to apply noise assist to.
Excellent description, Mitchell.
And Chris is absolutely correct. However, if you want to have multiple channels of noise assist, I'm just smiling at something, what you want to do is go up to the 7 series or 8 series. You're going to pay the privilege of it. You can put all the versions of noise assist you want on all the individual channels. It's not limited to 1. So if you got a 7 or an 8 series, you can do that. And you have the option of purchasing the Cedar noise assist plugins that are there. They'll work for those guys.
Mitch,
do you have to rebuy it for every channel? Or once you purchase the noise assist, do you just have it accessible to as many channels as you can apply it to?
Individual licenses for individual channels for each of them.
Really?
That's why you noted the cost factor. Which
I just thought the cost was for the more advanced mixer, but
yeah. Wow. Plus the 8 is like what, $10,000, something close to that.
Okay, so if you're at network level budget land, this may be a solution for you. For some of us, not so much, but It's a big marketplace out there. Thank you guys for the answers. That really, I'm sure, helped Andy and a lot of other folks out there. Next question.
Next one in from James Haldane in Vancouver, Canada. Roland has released a new switcher with a lot of interesting features. There's a link to it. Thoughts from the panel.
And we're going to start with Mitch Hill.
Here comes one of the thoughts. Wow. I don't have the graphic to put up, but it's very interesting. It's everything you wanted in a Zoom switcher and then some. It's got audio mixer built into it. It's got a switcher. It also has the ability to play back stills and video clips as part of the transitions between elements. It has SDI and HDMI in it also. So that's just me looking at it for about 30 seconds. That's all I had time to. Amazing. I have no idea what the cost is, but I would say that it would be a very, very cool thing to have. And the first person who gets one wins.
Jesse Kester.
Oh boy, does this thing look good. It has got a lot of features that we have been very, very interested in having in a board since we started working on the ATEM mini series. I'm going to jump over to the website just so we can show off some of the stuff. What's really nice is the back of the board has so many inputs, including XLR, which is tremendously welcome. You got a whole row of HDMIs and a whole row of SDIs and tons of output options. It looks very configurable. The thing that I'm not seeing is if it has onboard recording, and beyond that, if it has onboard ISO recording, because since we switched over to the ATEM ISO, it is almost impossible for us to leave that workflow. But it looks like a fantastic board. We'll find out the price if we can. I haven't seen it on their website yet.
So there's not an MSRP, a manufactured suggested retail price, which may or may not bear any relation to reality that's been published out there. I'm surprised at that.
Just because I've only started poking around the website. I imagine there might be something like that somewhere. I just haven't found it yet.
John Cutter, what are your thoughts?
If we find it.
$6,500.
$6,500. Okay. Well, that seems like a lot of mixer at that level. Of course, nobody here has put it through the ringer in terms of channel strip noise specs and everything else. So there's much to be learned, but it certainly is an interesting thing. Chris Fenwick, you had more thoughts?
Yeah, check this out. On the video output, you can repatch whatever signal you want to various outputs. It seems super configurable.
So it has like
very interesting.
A matrix router kind of built into it? A mini matrix router?
Okay, so this is what I'm looking at. Let's take a look at this again. Here they have the program.
Wait a second, give them a little, they haven't put your graphic up. Let's see if we can get Chris's graphic up.
Okay.
Jesse Kester has it. Jesse, can you follow him? And let's see if we can get that
program output. The program output, they have it sent to one SDI, one USB-C, and one to the streamer. Okay, his sub-program, who knows what that means, that's going to a different SDI. An aux out goes to the third SDI. And considering the way it's drawn like this, I'm just making an assumption here, but considering the way it's drawn, it seems like it's, because it looks kind of haphazard, it seems like it's very configurable. It seems really cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Interesting approach. Well, they've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about this. Mitchell, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm going to have to spend a lot more time looking too, because every time I look, I see something new. 2 USB outs and the possibility of controlling it from 2 different computers. I need to confirm that, but it seems to indicate 2 destinations at the very least of where
you can do that with an ATEM as well. Even the Extreme ISO has 2 USB outs. And because it's on your Ethernet network, you can control it from multiple computers.
I forget that it can also be plugged into a SSD. So there you go. And the other thing, just as a commentary, we were talking a lot about the Roland UVC02, which is the single channel device. That in itself is pretty game changing, because it's just a quick, easy way to get one channel into Zoom and without much problem. And I think all of this from Roland is a response to the success of Blackmagic Design and the ATEMs, because Roland's been at this a long time, probably longer than Blackmagic. So they have a lot of research and development and expertise in making these things work. So I'm looking forward to see a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, I imagine we'll be talking about it a good little bit here on Office Hours. Jesse Kester, your additional thoughts? Oops, you're muted.
Yes. I feel like once every 2 weeks or once a week, we get a question related to multiple different kinds of mixes on the ATEM, different audio mixes. And it looks like they've gotten ahead of that question and not only having a whole bunch of video outputs, but a whole bunch of different audio mixes, and you can choose where those mixes go. So this could be a very interesting piece of equipment.
Absolutely. Nigel.
Yeah, someone asked about the O2. I got one of those. I have to tell you, this is a very hefty piece, feels very solid. I plugged it in yesterday, seems to work. I shall be experimenting with it.
Good. Let us know how their quality of build is. And if they do the same thing with this new device, it may be definitely worth taking a look at. All right. Well, everybody's excited about a new piece of gear. Let's put that in the back pocket and move on to the next question.
Moving on to Tobias Moss from Minneapolis asking, any recommendations for a power bank that has a standard outlet on it? I want to be able to power LED lights in the field for a couple of hours, but they aren't USB-C connectable.
Chris Fenwick.
Tobias, there are many such products in the like camping, overlanding sort of world. What you're going to look for, I don't know what they call it, but it's you called it a power bank. That makes me think of, you know, a USB battery. These are much larger, more about the size of at least a lunchbox, and they're going to have USB ports and AC ports. There is a term, I bet you Jason knows it, like sine wave, or there's certain terms that are used for like really clean power. I don't know that all of them provide that, and I wish I knew what it was called because then I could tell you what to look for.
Yeah, it's sinusoidal output.
Okay, so there's good and there's bad. Look for good, but they're going to be larger, and they're going to cost you, I'm going to say, a minimum of like $500, maybe as much as $1,000. But there's a lot of them. Some of the nicer ones, actually, besides the lunchbox, which is hefty, they also come with like fold-out solar panels. Let's say you're out camping, you want to be able to charge all your devices, but you don't want to plug into your car for fear of killing your automobile. That's what they use.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the same thing that Chris is describing, particularly in people who do RVing. There's a lot of call for people who want to do what are called, I guess, boondocking. They go out to some place that doesn't have any power and just exist and camp for a few days. And so you have to bring everything on board. And so there's a lot of effort in that field of combining solar panels with larger scale batteries. I was surprised. I took apart one of the little kind of regular bricks, and it turned out that it was mostly these little kind of smaller than C-cell batteries in a whole series inside it under the cover. And that's kind of the typical take your extra phone charger to work with you kind of power supply. These are much bigger, as Chris indicates, and some of them last a long time, have a pretty serious charge on board to keep you working. And at the top of that, they have enough power stored in there to give you a standard Edison style output, hopefully rectified and all filtered and nice so it doesn't mess with your equipment. So it's an interesting space for those of us who have to work remotely in the field and maybe need to take gear and lights out there. Something to look at. Next question.
Next question coming in from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Much time and effort are put into lower thirds. Do you have a general practice for placements of other than lower thirds so it won't affect the YouTube CC?
Chris will start us off again.
Jack, I'll tell you what I do. And I've done this for Twitter. I've done it for Instagram. Is I'll take freeze frames of their user interface with a piece of video in it. And then what I do is I make an overlay that has all of their little things. Some like Twitter has a little clock and whatnot. And I'll put those into my graphics package as I'm composing. And then that way I can make sure that any additional graphics that I lay on don't interfere with what's there. Of course, the other approach to take is to just say, I'm making a great looking video and I don't care how you screw it up.
Chill.
Chris is exactly right, and I agree 100%. By the way, that stuff that's on there, Alex calls that debris. So we want to work around the debris.
There you go. All right. Hopefully that helped you, Jack. Let's move on to the next question.
Nigel DeSalle from Austin, Texas, asking, is there a Q&A engine in Zoom, and how do you access it?
Let's go to Nigel and find out. Nigel.
Yeah, so I'm not talking about Makana. I'm not trying to pass this to myself. I've heard a lot of talk in the last few weeks that there is a separate Q&A engine outside Makana and Commenda and all of those things, but I can't seem to find it, and I wonder whether it's specified somewhere and I just haven't found it.
Chris Fenwick, got any help for him?
So, Nigel, traditionally, it was only in webinars that there was a Q&A that we used to use back in the day here. I understand it has been added to meetings or possibly is about to be added to meetings. It's possible it's something you have to turn on in the back end. I haven't actually looked into it because I wasn't really that interested, but I did hear the same rumors.
Yeah, we just did a show on Zoom, had the Zoom team in, and I think they mentioned that. So you might want to go back and look at that show from just a few days ago. Let's go to, I'm sorry. Let's say that was Nigel and Chris. So we're going to the next question.
Javier Alfaro from Mexico City, Mexico asks, what do you use to clean the screen on your phone, tablet, laptop, etc.? I use a product called Whoosh because I seldom use it in an Apple store to clean their products.
Jason.
You know, I wonder how much of Apple's or of Whoosh's product usage is because somebody's watched it done in an Apple store. I too use Whoosh, and it's because I'm cooler than Apple and had it before they did. But keep in mind, it's also safe for the most part to use Windex. And here's the key. There's if and only if you put it on the cloth and not on the screen. Don't spray it directly on the screen. Put the laptop down directly so that nothing, and I mean nothing, can get into that little bezel spot. And then if you wipe it going one way and then wipe it going the other way, it should be pretty free from any junk, schmutz, whatever you want.
Jason, do you know if there's any preclusion about whether the product has ammonia in it or not? Does that affect any of the plastic or the
Whoosh
things on
has
screens?
neither alcohol nor ammonia.
Okay,
and
so but if you're using
Apple got
Windex.
into some trouble. Well, Apple got into some trouble, right? They had this issue with screen peelings, and that has, Whoosh has been tested, and no, it doesn't cause that.
Okay, Mitchell, you had a product to hold up.
I was saying that this portion of Office Hours is brought to you by Glass Plus, which is ammonia-free, and get that fresh, streak-free shine on your monitor. Yeah,
Oh, dear.
ammonia is bad for the coatings on your screen, and you definitely don't want that on there. The best thing to use is just warm soapy water with a little isopropyl alcohol in it. But as Jason suggested, do not apply it directly to the screen or you're going to have big problems.
You mess things up, Mitch. Now everybody's going to want product placement on this show, and that will mess things up totally anyway. All right, moving on to the next question.
Moving on to Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. Do you have advice for producing a successful and compelling video podcast? Thanks.
Chris is going to help us, and then Jesse.
Andy, I've done a little bit about this, and I'll tell you the same thing I tell everybody that asks me about producing a podcast. This is what I would recommend you do. And this doesn't matter if you're doing an audio podcast or a video podcast. The number one thing that, in my opinion, that you want to do when you're producing a show is you have to realize that for some reason, podcasting more so than other shows, you're developing a very intimate relationship with your audience. And like any good friend, if you show up on their doorstep and you want to talk to them, if they're not home, you're very disappointed. So it's the same thing when you set a release schedule for your show. In my opinion, it's more important to have a consistently released show than it is to have a good show. Now, the content should be good, but it doesn't have to be fancy. A lot of times people in the production world will put a lot of effort into, I'm going to make these lower thirds just right. We're going to get the lighting perfect because it's the one time that I get to control something and I don't have to deal with my client. I can make it perfect. What you're going to find is that the audience cares more that you are there than that you are there and you look perfect or, the lower thirds or network quality. Just pick a schedule that you want to release, I would say once a week, and stick to it. And so what you have to do is you have to budget your time, look at how much time you could put into producing this show. And if you're like most podcasts, you're probably not making any money, at least in the beginning. So you have to use your available time, and then you gauge your production level based on the amount of time that you can actually apply to it. The last podcast that I produced, I had very little time to put into it. And I put maybe 2 hours a week into it. There was about an hour or 30 minutes into finding a guest to talk to. I wasn't very good at it. And then I would record the show for about 45 minutes. And within a half hour, it was posted on YouTube. And I was, not YouTube, but iTunes, however you do all that. I can't remember now. And I was done with it. I was like, okay, now I have to go to work to actually make money, because I never made any money per se off the podcast.
There you go. Jesse Kester.
Yes, iteration is absolutely key to success here, and that doesn't just go for. I'm agreeing with the release regularly, and that leads to a system of iteration where you improve it week by week and episode by episode. I can't give you too much advice on how to make a successful podcast, but I can tell you how to guarantee a failure. Junky audio will reduce your audience to nothing immediately. People have options. They have no reason to tune into another Zoom call right now. So make sure your audio sounds better than a laptop microphone or a cell phone. What was the other thought? Was the video. Remember that you can break format with video with a podcast. So a lot of people think that if you're doing a video podcast, it should be cut like a television program where you have one head up and then you cut to camera B, camera C. You can have two heads side by side with a podcast, or 4 screens up to watch people reacting to each other in real time. And the last thing I'll say is that you should go back to a thought on what need podcasts fill. And I'm not talking about any one specific genre or topic on your podcast. I'm talking about the human need that they fill. And it's very different from other kinds of entertainment. When you're tuning into a podcast, I think it's more like sitting down to a meal with people that you really respect than it is looking for escapism that you might get through other modes of entertainment, like a feature film or something like that. So just remember that you're servicing a different biological need than other forms of entertainment, and build your content around those needs as you can best understand them.
And who was next? Nigel was next. There you go.
Yeah, so don't let great get in the way of the good here. Start, enjoy, play. Where you start is not where you end up. I mean, Joe Rogan didn't start with the podcast he has today. It took years, lots of things changed. Whatever you do, have fun and do it. Let it go where it goes. If you don't get 10,000 people watching on day one, don't give up. I'm willing to bet where you start is not where you'll end up. But if you don't start the journey, you'll never know. And don't let the perfection sometimes of office hours get in the way of getting something out.
Chris Fenwick had a last thought.
Last thought, Nigel, I love what you said about having fun. Fun is infectious, and again, that relationship I mentioned, people come for that fun. So yes, you should have fun with it. It's really frustrating when you watch somebody like getting angry on the air because something isn't going well. It's like, oh, that's just an audience killer.
Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York, asking, send a ticket to Zoom as I'm not getting 1080p in an enabled meeting. They mentioned that the person sending 1080 HD also needs to be in full screen view and looking at speaker view. Do you agree with this?
We talk a ton about Zoom here, and we have a lot of people who know a lot about it. So Jason, help us.
Okay, so if you're certain that all the prerequisites, by the way, I'm going to read this directly from Mickey because my answer was good and his is better. If you're certain that all prerequisites for transmitting and receiving a 1080p is met, have the 1080p contributor toggle the HD checkbox and the client's preferences off and then on again. He said that the past few months' updates of the client have been very buggy and sometimes that needs to be switched.
Oh, there's a great behind-the-scenes tip. Chris Fenwick, you want to add something?
Yeah, that's very good. No, the sender what is happening on their screen being in full, that has nothing to do with your ability to receive it. Now, what does have to happen is, and this is a good frame of reference to keep in mind, Zoom uses a ton of data, and they are going to do everything they can to minimize the flow of data that has to go across their network. Therefore, if you have a 1080 account, but every window on your screen is small, they're not going to send you 1080. They're not going to bother because it's wasted on the small display. If I can actually see it on my display, when I pull the window out bigger, all of a sudden it'll go pop. Oh, there's the 1080. That's one thing I wanted to say. Oh, and just because Zoom says they've bestowed upon you 1080, you still have to go into the back end and check it from 720 to 1080. Again, they're trying not to send a whole lot of data. I know the Zoom folks would hate me saying that out loud. We love you guys, but it makes sense because if everybody in the world on Zoom was always using 1080, I think it would break the internet.
There you go. Let's go to the next question.
Next one in for Douglas Carmichael. I finally ordered an M2 Pro Mac Mini, 32 gigabyte RAM, 4 terabyte SSD, and I'm looking at the OWC Mini Stack STX for storage. However, reviews have said it is low transfer speed, 770 megabytes per second for the SSD and 150 megabits per second for the HDD hard drive. Would that be enough for audio?
Jason Beish.
First, congratulations on finally buying another Mac. Thank you and congratulations. Well, let's just go with it depends and compared to what. I'll call your attention to the link in Mukana, which is from a non-tech, and it states and then tests the T5, which many of us at office hours have used for uninterrupted 6K recording of video in RAW without incident. That drive does 550 megabytes per second. So 770 is slow compared to what? Compared to Thunderbolt? Yeah, I guess it's slow compared to Thunderbolt, but honestly, for audio, I think it'll be all right.
Chris Fenwick.
So, Douglas, you're doing something that I've seen people do for decades. Oftentimes in this business, we get so gear frantic. There's another word I was going to use, clean show. We get so excited about the gear that we obsess over the numbers and the stuff and the things. And quite frankly, most of the time, it is my experience, I watch this happen, most of the time, you listen to it going, just make your show. You're going to be fine. You're good. A good friend of mine contacted me a while ago and he said, so I'm looking at the videos that I'm uploading to YouTube, and it seems to be that there's a slight green shift between the QuickTime that's on my desktop and what I'm seeing on the internet. And I looked at him, I said, dude, you're watching video. It's on the internet. It's in color and it moves. Relax. Be excited. Move on to the next thing.
Always good advice. Next question.
Tobias Moss from Minneapolis here to ask, has anyone accessed the improvements of the OWL 3 versus the older OWL Meeting Pro? Anyone have a recommendation for a better 360-degree speaker finding camera? We use the OWL to auto-switch who is on the frame and a better separate mic for audio capture.
I have no experience with that, but I'm fascinated with it. So there's a 360-degree speaker finding camera. I mean, we've seen systems out there, and they're getting better and better all the time of auto tracking of people. But if that's in a 360-degree format, I'm fascinated. And hopefully we can get the folks behind Al on the show to give us more information about the technology they're using to do that. I did watch something the other day that was really interesting about I think it was our own Jeffrey Powers who was talking about shooting everything at the latest CES with 360 and then cutting both the shot for the audience and the shot of him as the interviewing out of those 360 frames and dewarping them or whatever he had to do them. So it became like an A/B roll system. I was fascinated by that. This sounds like it's something that might do the same thing. Nigel, you had a thought?
Yes, by the way, I was thinking the same thing about what you were just talking about in terms of that 360 camera and what he did and how clever that was. That really stuck with me. I don't know this particular device. I didn't get to research it enough in time, but I know Microsoft used to have one that was put on the middle of the table with a bunch of mirrors. And I saw a number of them go into offices, and then I never saw them again. So I don't know whether that says something about the device or Teams, but my guess is they weren't very successful.
That's interesting. So they had something in a conference table that had a 360 camera and then mirrors to show individual shots?
Yeah, and theoretically in Teams, when you became the active speaker, it should cut to you, and it was mirrors. And you can just imagine.
I can imagine. Oh, man. That's a little Rube Goldberg for my money. Hopefully they've made that a little more sophisticated. Let's go on to the next question.
From Justin James in Phoenix, Arizona, was testing Zoom ISO for screen share capture, and the Zoom ISO client only showed a black screen saying participant has started sharing screen. Any ideas how to get Zoom ISO to show the shared screen when this happens?
Chris Fenwick's going to help us out.
I just had this problem the other day, and our friend Jonas Dattel in Germany pointed out. So, sometimes it doesn't work as advertised. What you need to do there's the column where it says like the type of feed, and by default it says participant. First thing you need to do is on one of your outputs, you have to select screen share. That output, in theory, then will feed the screen share. And what you're seeing is you're getting a black signal. So what you want to do is you want to go into the Zoom settings on the Zoom ISO Zoom client. And under screen settings, screen sharing, there's 3 radio buttons, and you want to click the one that's on the far right. I can't remember what it's called. Sorry, visual. The far right one. Also, you may find that if you change the screen share output to a different output, it will all of a sudden start to work. But yes, sometimes it does show black. I was having trouble with this, what day is today? Thursday. Earlier this week, was able to get it to work about half the time. And then I had a sort of emergency recording I had to do, and I followed all the instructions that Jonas gave me, and I got it to work just fine. So I'm just going to call it a bug. It's not working perfect. It will work. Keep poking around at it.
I'm interested, Chris. What was the first thing Jonas told you to do? Was there full reboots, or did he just send you in the direction of individual controls? Do you remember how he helped you solve that problem?
Sorry, my lady in my computer started talking to me. I think I heard most of that. The button you need to hit under the Zoom preferences. Let me show you like this. There's a window I'm supposed to not show to the public. It's this one. Hey, that's me. So under screen sharing or share screen, you want to make sure maintain.
Yeah, we're still seeing you. We're not seeing your screen yet. If you wanted to point it out.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I would have to change a bunch of stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's all right. Just describe.
It's called maintain current size under the screen share tab in Zoom. That's the main thing. And then the other thing that I found was that by switching it to say output 4 or possibly output 1, all of a sudden it would start to work. It's a little buggy, but the fact that it works. So what you'll end up seeing is you'll have Chris Fenwick and Chris Fenwick, but one of them is selected as participant, which means it'd be my face, and the other one is selected as screen share, so it will grab Chris Fenwick's screen share.
Interesting.
You can also only have one person at a time sharing a screen, obviously.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of circumstances where something didn't work and you just switch away from it and you switch back to it. And for some reason, the logic kind of solves its problem and it gets
It's a good troubleshooting principle to take. Sometimes just looking at it and saying, well, the button is checked, uncheck it, recheck it. Same thing happens with the OBS on the Mac. I'll open up what was a camera source and it's selected. And I was like, huh. So I change it to a different input, change it back. Oh, now it start working.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. Yeah.
That's what we call jiggle the handle.
It's just one step short of the kinetic adjustment You tap it and hope that the bad connection gets good
We
again.
call that a Fonzie slap.
Fonzie slap. There you go. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Next question coming in from Ronny Hafsoy in Tromsø, Norway. New flight pack in the build. What is the fine difference between the ATEM 2ME and the 4ME Constellation HD, besides the extra ins and outs, MADI audio, and the extra super source and DVEs? What is the practical need for 4ME versus a 2ME?
I think the answer to this is 2 extra mix effects buses. I think that's the point between a 2ME and a 4ME is one has 2 buses dedicated to being able to do mix effects, and the other one has 4. I can't think of anything beyond that. I am not a Constellation user, so I don't have direct experience with that. But I think that is a capability Alex talks about a lot in terms of the ability to move into larger shows and still do the kind of composites that mix effect buses allow you to do, and then switch to those composites from regular video input channels. That seems to me to be kind of what's happening there. Hopefully that was satisfying enough. But Ronnie, if you want more, sneak around when Alex is here. He knows this stuff really, really well. Thanks for that question. Let's move on to the next one.
From David Paskin in Miami, Florida. If I unlink a user with their own pro plan from a Zoom org, will they retain their pro plan?
I wish we had our Zoom friends here. That would be something they could tell you specifically. It should be specified in their terms of service, and I know it's sometimes hard to find that, but most of those services like Zoom will have on their website most of the details that you're looking for in terms of specifically what are you allowed to do under the various plans. And I think that's probably the only way you can get a authoritative answer to that, unless we have somebody on the panel who uses that feature of the Zoom plan. So David, sorry, you'll be here in the next couple of days. Let's bring it back again sometimes when you can get a closer answer than that. Next question.
Next one in from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Is there any way to detach my Zoom OSC Pro license from my Zoom ISO Pro? I want to use the Zoom OSC Pro in a main meeting with the participants, and the Zoom OSC Basic in the breakout room Zoom ISO would live.
Jason's going to help us here. Jason?
I'm pretty sure you can disconnect it, and if you need to split it, which is actually what I think, if I'm reading your question correctly, you're actually after, I would email them, and I think you'll get a pretty fast response. But to my knowledge, you should be able to sign out of one and then into the other instantaneously. Like, give it a second and you're good.
Nice. Okay. Hopefully that'll work for you, Scott. Let us know. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, what sort of external control support do the Roland switchers have? Would there be anything as robust as Mix Effect?
Mitch, start us off.
Mix Effect is a great program. First, just let me explain what it does. It's a Swiss Army knife remote control for your ATEM that allows you to build super sources and remote control various aspects of your ATEM to the point where you could probably put Mix Effects into your Stream Deck and do everything from it. As of yet, I have seen no response or announcements from Adam Tao over at Mix Effects. So the answer to your question is no, I don't think so. And yes, wouldn't it be cool if they did that? And the question is whether or not Roland provides an SDK that would allow that to happen.
Jason Beish.
Let me see here. Nope, not even a little bit. Like, not even close. Like, in no world, no way, shape, or form. I put in the Mukana chat the PDF for their only actual external control app, and I'll let you be the judge, but let me save you some time. Nope.
Okay, there's a pretty definitive answer. Chris Van Wyck, do you want to take issue or you want to support that?
I just want to make sure I understand Jason accurately. You're saying no? Is that what you're saying?
I believe it was the opposite of yes. That is what I said.
So here's the problem with the Roland switcher just in general. I mean, it could be great. It could be amazing. It could be awesome. But Blackmagic is so far ahead of them in terms of people joining ship, getting on board, that it would be really, really difficult for somebody to say, oh, wow, this is this thing. I mean, if you look back just historically, go back 40 years, VHS versus Beta. Even though the Betamax was way better, there was such a groundswell of people buying VHS machines that everybody just had the bad one. And I'm not saying Blackmagic is bad. It might sound like I'm saying that. I'm not, although some people don't like it. But they are so far out ahead that there's just this groundswell of third-party people developing things for it, which then in turn just makes it better. So Blackmagic would have to hit it out of the park many times before they got all of the developers to take notice and say, hey, let's go work with this thing.
Oh, I think you meant Roland would have to hit it out of the park to.
Clearly, that's what I meant. I don't know why you thought I meant anything else, though. Of course.
I'm sorry. Anyway, it's an ecosystem is what I'm hearing from Chris. And I have to admit, we've been talking about that for a long time. The Blackmagic ecosystem has become so strong in the last 2 years that it's going to be more difficult. But competition is always a good thing. Let's hope that other products come along and push everybody. Nigel has some thoughts on this. Nigel?
Yeah, you took the word right out of my mouth. This is an ecosystem question. You will always find a point solution that is better than the combination of the ecosystem. You will always find the ecosystem is better than the point solution, a set of point solutions brought together. So what we use are ecosystems.
That makes sense. Mitchell Hill.
Yeah, I like ecosystems. That's a great word to describe it. Isn't there in some multiverse universe the possibility that Roland could say, oh, we're going to release an SDK so you can control it, like Mix Effect? It'd be a smart move on their part, and hint, hint, maybe they should get in touch with Adam Tao over at Mix Effect.
There you go. We're about to move to the next question. We do have a couple of slots open, so if you have other questions for today for General before our guest comes in at the top of the hour, toss them in there. Be a great time to get your needs met here on Office Hours. Next question.
Harshid Trivedi from Daytona Beach, Florida, and right here on our panel, asking TV shows in the past have changed their actors to portray a character. However, in animated media with voiceover actors running a show, how would a change in voices for the characters impact you?
Ooh, fascinating question. This is the multiple Darrens question. Javier, take it away.
Well, for me, it's extremely distracting. Even when an actor has like a cold or something, I really notice it. But I have two examples that happened here in Mexico. When I was a kid, all of the cartoons that we saw here were dubbed in Mexico. So with long form anime like Dragon Ball Z or Knights of the Zodiac, like there are like 300 chapters for a series. They switched characters a lot. I work in dubbing, and it was like, yeah, I did 10 episodes of this character and 5 episodes of this other character. And when someone couldn't make their call, someone else like tried to like impersonate them, like try to get us close at it. And people didn't notice. No one noticed it. But a very different thing happened with The Simpsons. It was a super hit show in Mexico in the 90s. The dubbing in Mexico was excellent. I only listened to it dubbed like for the first 10 seasons. And then after, I think, season 10 or 11, the studios were, the actors were asking for more money because it was a great show and it was like one of the top shows in the prime spot in Mexico, even though a lot of people were not getting like the US humor, but like most of it was like so well done that he has like the essence of the original show, but with some different twists that really resonated with the Mexican audience. And when the actors asked for more money, the studio were like, no, that's it. That's what you're getting. And they were like, okay, we're gonna walk. And the studio was like, okay, walk. And they changed the whole cast. I think like maybe one or two, just like the secondary stayed, and the people, like the audience, left in droves. Like we started looking for how to get the DVDs with the original audio, and started listening in English. Obviously, like the new kids that never listened to the original were like, for me, it's fine. There's no worry. But all of these 90s kids that we were like super invested, we switched to English and never looked back. And then like maybe 5 years ago or something like that, they came back. The original dubbing actors, they win at the end. So they are redubbing a lot of the stuff that they make without them. So it's like two very different cases. The Simpsons caused like a howl, and in the long form anime, no one noticed.
Javier, that was a fabulous story. I learned a lot, and it was really outstanding. Nigel, what are your thoughts?
I worked for a radio station where we changed the jingles, and people called in and complained and said they were never going to listen to the radio station again. And I was young and inexperienced. The program manager said to me, "Don't worry, in 3 days they won't remember what the old one sounded like." So that was an important lesson. I think you will definitely notice the change, particularly if it's in something you're very connected to. Now, you may have better audio skills than the rest of us, because your audio skills may be have been heightened, and so it may be more sensitive to you. I think after a couple of days or a couple of times, you probably won't remember. I think when they change the actor in your favorite program, depending on the quality of the program, sometimes you're willing to accept it, and sometimes it's just the reason you needed not to accept it anymore. And I think an example of that, at least for me, was we were watching House of Dragons. And if you've watched House of Dragons, between episode 5 and 6, they change all the female leads. So if I'm spoiling it for you, I'm sorry. So, and it's like, we couldn't get over it. Just couldn't. I know I'm on a rant. I apologize. Not bitter at all. But we couldn't get it, because one of them was okay. The other one was a completely different character, and there was no explanation. And I think they were just trying to jump the storyline forward, but it was completely jarring. And so, to me, it depends on not only who, but the quality of the content you're watching.
That's a fascinating perspective. Thank you. Mitch Hill.
First off, Harshid, thanks for the question, because I think it's a good one for a lot of reasons, because we don't always see the character. We hear them and we form emotional attachments to them. And we're very, very sensitive to the subtleties of their presentation. When Kevin Conroy, the voice of the animated Batman, passed away, a number of the actors just said, "I'm not going to do the show anymore." Mark Hamill said that he's not going to do the Joker anymore because Kevin was such a part of that animation. So you can see where those kind of emotional attachments would affect people. I'm not even going to get into the bewitched Darren thing, because that was just plain weird. But the other example of an voice actor heard but not seen, would be the robot on the Lost in Space. That robot had a lot of personality, and our friend Dick Tufeld brought quite a bit of "Warning, Roy Robinson." And the way he talked, it was so very specific and distinct that when they did the first Lost in Space movie, they were using another actor or affected voice, and there was so much pushback from the tests that they ran that they brought Mr. Tufeld back out to do the voice of the robot, and it just fit. It made sense. So that's the thing. It's maybe some of these parts need to be retired when the actor is no longer available to do them.
Chris, your thoughts?
It's interesting. We're kind of revisiting a theme from earlier about having that emotional attachment to somebody. Also, Javier, great anecdote about The Simpsons in Mexico. I will definitely remember that one. I also want to point out, and this isn't just voice actors, this is about replacing people. There is a 3-part movie trilogy that was made for the book Atlas Shrugged. And they cast the movie, part 1, they shot the movie, and it was considered to be so awful that the entire cast quit. They wouldn't do parts 2 and part 3. They knew it was a trilogy. Second part came out, they just had all new people. And like the whole time you go, wait a second, who's this person? I can't, you had to figure it out. I mean, I enjoyed watching it because I wasn't about to read Atlas Shrugged. That's too many words for me, but they just hated it so bad. The whole cast quit.
Unbelievable. Well, this has been, I think, one of the more interesting threads we've done in a while, because there's so much depth to it. Being a voice talent myself and having done it for 35, 40 years now, it's always interesting about this idea of identification. We've had great voice talents. Some of them have been replaceable by necessity. I'm thinking of people like Mel Blanc, who did so many cartoon characters in the early days. And then later on, to keep those characters alive, they had to find people who could replace them and do almost a mimic of what Mel Blanc did originally. But we've also seen those circumstances where a replacement failed to connect with the audience. And I think there's something very specific about listening to people in your head perform a character. Sometimes they are really tied together. Sometimes they can be replaced. And it's kind of a piece by piece call on it. Mitch, you had a last thought before we move on?
Yeah, I think that Mel Blanc example is great because Mel's son, I forget his first name, tried to do the Bugs Bunny character and it just didn't come across. But it did come from another source, a guy named Billy West, who you might have heard on the Howard Stern show doing voices. He nails it. So if you're very lucky, you can get somebody that studied it enough to be able to do the character voice.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was at NAB and there was actually a panel with voice performers, and they were talking about a woman who was trying to be cast to fit a role. And they went through like 200 people until they found her, and she had the ability to do it very similar to that iconic character that was retiring or something had happened to. So
there was a movie that they were doing the relooping the voice for Richard Nixon. And they brought Rich Little in to do the voice, and nobody knew.
There you go. So next question. That was fascinating.
Douglas Carmichael asking, in an article about the evolving role of the DJ in the sports world, it mentioned the DJ creating mashups in real time to follow the action of the game. Wouldn't creating mashups or even custom tracks take a significant amount of studio work?
Jason Beish.
Well, you're talking about an entire decade of my life. In a former life, I had 2 million plus views and streamed every single night live doing this kind of work. And I can say straight away, no, it actually doesn't take a lot of studio work. I always thought of mixing as more like percussion. So if you are obsessed with music, you will find things, you will loop them, you will isolate them, and then you'll quantize them. At that point, it really is just like putting in and out tracks and fading it until you just decide that it sounds right. And that takes almost no studio time.
Interesting. Thank you for the insight. Let's go on to the next question.
From Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, what recommendations do you have for a $50 to $200 internal battery-powered LED lights? I love the Pavo Tube 6Cs, but wonder if any cousins, small floodlights, colored accent lights, string lights?
Mitch, start us off.
I like the NAND lights. I have a very expensive light panel up here for my key light, but I use NAND lights everywhere else, and they are battery powered, and they come in all sizes, including the small one that I have behind the door there to get a little splash of blue, which, by the way, Chris Fenwick made me do. And they work great. They're battery powered, and they also can operate off the same remote control. This is like a $20 remote. So NAND light, that's the ticket.
Jason Beish.
I did some commercial work with a really great wakeboarder named Austin Keene for LoomCube, and have since kind of fallen in love with their products. That was years ago. They've since come out with version 2.0. What's great about these is they are a cubic inch. They're tiny, and they are waterproof. So you can go scuba diving with them, and they actually have an underwater mode, which will allow the light to get brighter. But of course, you only want to use it with, when it's submerged in water, because if not, you might have a few problems. Oh, there's Fenwick has one. See, I'm not the only one. But yes, take a look at LoomCube. They're a little pricey, but they're pretty cool.
I think Chris was just holding it up, and I don't think we saw it. But let's, Javier, while you're talking, let's see if we can get a shot of one of them. It looks like Chris has one and Mitch has one. Javier, go ahead.
For accent lights, I really like this one, the Hugo. It is it's from the you can control it in HomeKit or with Alexa or with any of the smart things, and it has like different colors, and it can be powered like directly plugged in. And it has like a battery, so if you unplug it, it stays on for like 4 hours to 8 hours depending on the level. So for little accents of color, I really like those.
Hopefully, you got some choices here, Tobias. Let's go on to the next question.
From TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota, if you were to embed a live YouTube stream in a web page, kind of like Office Hours Global does, are the views from the web page counted in the concurrent views, or are they counted separately?
Jason, help us out.
That's a great question. And we're going to go with it depends. Google uses a unique ID. Anytime you sign in on any device, it kind of flags it with the metadata that is sent back to Google. If you are signed in and from the IP address, from the same IP address, it doesn't matter how many links you open, how many tabs, how many computers. If they're all signed in with that device and are transmitting back the same little snippet of unique ID, that would count as concurrent. If you don't, if you're using a VPN in from, let's say, your cellular phone, right? You're on your smartphone and you've turned off Wi-Fi and you're using cellular data, different IP address, and you are not signed in to the same account, then that would show up as a separate feed.
Nice. Thank you for TJ. And let's move on to the next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis asking, where would you place a single field recorder style microphone to record the sound of a New Orleans style band performing on an elevated stage with a boisterous audience in attendance? The horns are unamplified, but the vocals and my tenor banjo are.
Oh, interesting. Jesse Kester, give us some thoughts.
You have really painted us into a corner with this question, because what you're describing is pretty much every frequency coming from every direction in an environment like that. So if I had to do it with one microphone, I would put it, maybe 10 feet back from the stage, 15, where the ideal place in the actual audience would be to hear the sound. I'm not sure the size of the venue, but I'm imagining like 50 to 100 people. If at all possible, I would recommend bumping up your field recorder just a little bit to something that has the onboard mic, but also has XLR ins. And if you can get clean XLRs from the board, or perhaps from one of the monitors in the venue, you're going to have so much more flexibility in post-production on that than a single microphone. But that single microphone in an environment like that would be, I imagine, for review purposes only, for the band to listen to the performance and see where they could be making improvements on their performance, and not something that you could release to the public.
Mitchell.
Yeah, I would go with if it had to be a single mic, I would go with a stereo MS mic that has internal capsules that allow you to record the event. And then in post, you can actually steer the stereo image a little bit. I forget the name of the unit. If Mickey could yell at me and tell me what it is, I could pass it on to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are people who are like band recordists. This came out of, I think, the Grateful Dead era and stuff like that. People who just love to go capture live shows. And I see most of the most sophisticated of them using either coincident stereo pairs or maybe XY arrays, sometimes something more sophisticated. They tend to go into the front third of the audience and then up high. And I think the up high maybe helps them suppress a little bit of the audience around the mic. One of the worst problems you run into about trying to record live music is that if your microphone is 10 rows back and there are noisy people chattering around you, just the inverse square law means that chatter will be as present, sometimes more so, than the band itself. So that's, I think, the reason they tend to elevate on 10, 15-foot stands up for those kind of recordings. I'm not an expert at that, but those are my thoughts. Chris, you had some more stuff to talk about here?
Yeah, the Grateful Dead tapers. That's what they called themselves. They were famous. You could probably find a recording of any Grateful Dead show ever. And what I was going to say is, it's pretty simple if you think about it. Walk around, find the spot that sounds good, put your mics there.
There you go. Next question, probably the last one before we move on to our guest.
From Douglas Carmichael. Douglas asks, what would the panel recommend for a small 8 to 12 port managed 10 gigabyte switch? I'd want to have a SSH command line interface and a serial console port.
Jason, help us out here.
Okay, first off, any real serious switch is always base 8, not base 4, so that range doesn't really make sense. I'll give it to you on the lower end. I have had pretty good luck with Ubiquiti's 10 gigabit Ethernet 8-port switch. The command line isn't amazing, and you may or may not find the syntax to be annoying. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, it works.
So for those of you who have helped us out with our first hour questions, we want to thank everybody. Thank all the people who put questions into the system, and also all of the panelists for those great answers over the course of that. It is essentially the top of the hour now, which means we get the privilege of switching over for our special guest. We're excited to have Mick Reed here, the CEO of Clippn, as our second hour guest today. And for those of you who might want to look up Clippn, it's CLIPPN. So spell it right if you want to search it. We welcome you to Office Hours. Great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Excellent. So can you start us off by just telling the audience, what is Clippn? How do you describe it to people maybe unfamiliar with the services you provide?
Sure. We do a few things, and I'll tell you a little of the backstory, which might be interesting. But we do a few things. One of them is we are a stock footage aggregator, meaning that people, videographers, professionals, aspiring professionals, shoot video. We give them a dashboard to give them ideas. They upload the footage to us, and then we slice and dice it. We curate it. We clip it. And then most importantly, we tag it, and then we deliver it to the stock footage sites like Getty Images, for example, for monetization.
So you're a source for them. How does the rest you just mentioned monetization. How does that work?
Yeah. So in this model, when we deliver the footage to a stock footage distributor or an agency, sometimes they're called, and when it sells, then we split the revenue 50-50 with the content owner. They always own the content. We're essentially just a middleman for it, but we make it easier for them to do it because we've learned that videographers may be very good at shooting. They love to shoot, but when it comes to actually editing and then clipping and curating and even submitting it, there are a lot of friction points in the whole process, and it takes a whole different level of expertise. It's not really editing, it's really clipping. So that's why we started the company about 10 years ago. But in order to do that, you can imagine we need to really build a streamlined workflow, super efficient. So we were the first company, according to AWS, to put a real broadcast level MAM, media asset management system, into the cloud. And this is about 8 years ago now. And why we did that was because we never wanted to leave the cloud. So the footage goes up into the cloud, and everything we do, from editing to the tagging to distribution, actually happens in the cloud. Super efficient, super streamlined, and lower cost for us to start up. But then we realized, well, we built this really cool platform. What else can we do with it? So the other two business models that we have are virtual post-production for news organizations. Picture, one client has about 500-600 videographers around the world. They upload their footage to Clippn, and then we edit it, maybe create B-roll montages, pull out single clips, put the raws together, we tag it, and then we send it to multiple locations. We send it back to their broadcast, to their digital platforms. Maybe they have a licensing platform. So it's all ready to go. It's all to spec. And then, of course, we can monetize it for them too through Getty Images. The third thing that we do is, we realize that talking to so many media companies about these different models, I would always say, hey, how would you like to create a new stream of revenue from your existing assets? And I'm just talking the B-roll, not controversial. The lawyers won't care about this stuff. It's just the B-roll. Of course, BizDev would say, absolutely. Where do we sign? And then I would ask, okay, well, where is your footage? And then we found out that there's this whole problem, that there's a ton of footage out there growing every day that really is not being, tagged correctly. And I'm not talking about just the old film and videotapes that need to be digitized, but also new footage coming in. Can it be searched? Do you have the right metadata? Do you have the right title, description, and keywords so that an end user, even within your news organization or media organization, can actually find what they need? And the answer most of the times is no. So we also have this cataloging and tagging service to enable organizations to actually access their own footage. And of course, that boosts usage so they can use it. It saves money. They can create more with it. And then, of course, they can create new streams of revenue from that.
I am fascinated with that because from the time I migrated to Final Cut 10 plus years ago, 10, 11 years ago, I was having to deal more and more with keywords, particularly range-based keywords as the access to finding what I was looking for. And I realized that I needed strategies to do that. Can you talk a little bit about how Clippn looks at tagging the footage that comes in from everybody? How granular do you get? How wide do you get? What have you learned about how to do that well?
Yeah, I mean, good question. So, my background is I started in production and then I moved to post-production. So many years ago, 20, 25 years ago, I was the assistant editor packing up boxes of tapes and writing, on the spine on tape and writing on the, a label on the box and shipping it off to, storage in the salt mines. So I kind of understand like the minimal metadata. That's metadata, it's tagging, it's titling, its captions, but that's most tapes kind of have that level. So you might know roughly the title of the tape. You might know roughly what the shoot was about, but you have to think of what the end user, how does an end user look for footage and who is an end user? So you really have to know who is in that seat. Typically it's an editor. It's a producer, sometimes producer editor. And then, of course, it's someone who might be buying footage for a certain reason. And how do they look for it? Sometimes it's super specific. I'm looking for a shot of a sunset. Okay, you can, as long as it's tagged as sunset. But maybe someone is looking for, inspiration or spirituality or a certain mood or a certain color. We know editors sometimes, they've got a black hole in their timeline. And they need to fill it with something that matches the feel, the tone, and the shot that comes before and the shot that comes after. And that's a pretty complicated equation. Sometimes there's movement involved. Sometimes it's color. Are there people in it? And on and on. Is it long enough? Do you have handles for the 60 frame dissolve afterwards? So you actually have to tag footage a number of different ways in order for it to really be found, searched, found, and used. And so we always start, you ask about methodology and approach, we always start with that end user, and how would they be looking for it with, a sensitivity and an expertise in the content itself. We are really content people. We love content. And our goal is we don't want any footage wasted. Save all footage because you're going to be able to use it for something, but make it easy to access.
Now, if I have footage, I think that would be useful for Clippn, and I send it in. Do I have to tag things ahead of time, or do you have a crew there that takes the footage and applies maybe more appropriate metadata tags to it from your experience?
Yeah, so basically with all our models, we've developed this dashboard that's really intuitive. It's a 3-step wizard, basically. First step would be drag your files, video files of a similar story or event. Okay, that's kind of starting with that similar story or event. The second step would be, do you have any releases? Do you have a talent release? Do you have a property release? If it's that type of production. For news, of course, there aren't going to be releases. But for creative footage or commercial footage, there might be. And we encourage people in those cases to get releases. And then the third step is tell us what it is. We need to know. Somebody needs to input that basic information. Sometimes we can get that through an API. If your company already has a MAM, if you have spreadsheets and stuff like that, we might be able to get it, through kind of technical means. More often, especially with news, it's just minimal information. What's the title? Apple picking or surfing, people surfing. What's the description? Surfers on a beach, such and such place, and, date, time, location. And then what's really important is, because we're not robots, and the people who are shooting this footage aren't robots, and the people who are going to be buying it aren't. So it's really important to be sensitive to, to understanding that person who's uploading, and give them the ability to communicate with us directly. So there's a field that basically says notes, anything else we should know. Sometimes they say, I'm really sorry. I didn't have a tripod with me. The footage is really shaky, or I couldn't shoot a lot of footage. We got kicked out of the location or something like that. If you were a videographer handing off the camera card to an editor, what would you say to them? And this is a really powerful moment because, of course, when the footage gets uploaded, then the editor is looking at what the summary is. They get a sense of what this is. If there's anything specific that they can't know by looking at the footage, we've asked the uploader, we've trained the uploader to tell us that in the description or the notes. But then they also get a sense of, okay, what was in the shooter's mind when they were shooting? Because especially with news, we encourage them to get a lot of coverage, wides, mediums, and tights from different locations. This makes our job easier, but it's also more footage. It's better quality, following best practices. And the last thing that the editor does whenever they're editing that for those whatever predetermined uses they are, and they do vary from company to company, but the last thing that they do is they say something positive about the footage to reinforce best practices, like really good footage, excellent framing, and they can customize this too. And if they think that shooter can learn from something, then they give them some constructive feedback. Next time, please shoot for 10 seconds. Next time, please don't talk. Next time, use a tripod or a monopod, try and steady yourself. Of course, they wouldn't give that feedback if you said, hey, sorry, I didn't have my tripod with me. It's shaky. They would understand that. But so, in a couple really simple steps, it doesn't take any more time or, money. It doesn't really cost anything. But we tap into those really valuable moments to give feedback to the videographer, and that actually improves them. And this happens in the stock footage model that I described. It happens also in the news model for shooters, and that's something our clients love because we can take a good shooter and make them really great, and we can take a bad shooter and make them really great. And it's that feedback loop that's really important.
Can we talk about quality for a little bit in this respect? Everybody knows that there's a ton of people out there shooting. In the old days, the news shooters were all using Betacams or shoulder-mounted cameras, but boy, the landscape has certainly changed about that. Are there minimum requirements or maximum requirements? What's happening with all the people who are now capturing useful information on phones and things like that? Yeah. Where does Clippn fit into the quality spectrum?
Yeah, so I guess we need to define what quality is, right? And quality means a few different things. And there are certain best practices that I think we can all agree on. Don't make it too shaky, right? Okay. Hang on the subject for long enough so I can see it. And also, somebody who's going to be using it, an editor, needs a certain amount of time. And certainly if you're distributing this to a stock footage distributor, they want it at least 10 seconds long. So they're basic best practices we can agree on that those impact the quality. I would also say, resolution is something that's important. It's more and more important. We were, one of the first companies distributing, 4K. There's still a limit at, the stock footage sites about what, the highest resolution they can take. Of course, people can shoot 8K, 16K and stuff like that. They don't accept that. They take maximum 4K. But again, 4K might increase the possibility for usage and sales because someone who's only looking for, let's say they're going to edit something just for digital or mobile, they only need 720 or they need 1080, something like that. Well, okay, they can be a buyer, but somebody who's looking for 4K, well, they can be a buyer as well. So you actually expand your potential buying audience by shooting 4K. But then there's the other aspect of quality. And I think of this as beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And this is what really, really changed for me after I started Clippn, because I come from a production background. I shoot, I edit, I know how to make videos. I know what's a good shot, right? And this is what I thought. We could all take a look at the most beautiful sunset in the world or the most highly produced shot or a really rare shot or something like that. And we can say, this is amazing. Like, this is a great shot. This is the best shot anyone's shot. So the quality is really high. When it comes to stock footage, none of that matters at all. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And you have to think again about that editor or that producer, the person who is looking for something and they want to buy a certain type of footage. And there are all those different things that are going through their head and the timeline that they're thinking about. They're not thinking of, is it the most beautiful shot? They're not thinking, is it really rare or the production value is incredible? Most of the time, they're not thinking about any of this stuff. They're just thinking, does it work, or is this a shot that I'm looking for? So we learned this when we started selling, a lot of clips for people, and thinking, footage would come in and we'd be like, whoa, this is going to sell a ton. Wouldn't sell at all. Our top selling clip for years was a close-up shot of someone tying their dirty work boots. Like that. So, really, that's really surprising, right?
I wouldn't have expected that to be a big ask out there. But now that I think about it for a moment, there's
a lot of money in dirty work boots. So they made, I don't know if it was thousands, but the person who shot that made a ton of money. And there are a lot of stories like that. Of course, some of the shots that we think will sell really well, they do. But that was a real, that took me a while to really wrap my head around. And what we've done, we've developed a methodology around that, because if you know that you can make money, if you're a videographer, you can make money in the stock footage market. How do you actually pick up you have a day off? How do you actually pick up your camera and go out shooting, with confidence that that's going to sell? Like that's a tough thing. So we've basically turned it into a numbers game. We've turned it into, we call it quantity, quality, and variety. And quantity, the more you shoot, it's just going to increase the chances that you're going to sell. It's purely a numbers game. Quality, of course, we've talked about best practices. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And then variety is the other thing. If you shoot nothing but surf videos, that may limit the pool of people who are looking for surf videos. So we give people ideas of other categories to shoot, because we know that you may shoot 50 things that come to you and then you can't think of anything else. So we actually give them, ideas of things that are actually, people are looking for, just general categories. And if you stick to that quantity, quality, and variety, we found over the years, we're almost 10 years now, that people start making money. And so it's really sticking to kind of that numbers-based methodology.
Interesting. I have a project in house right now that's real interesting to me, because it's a natural history museum in the local area. And I just got all of their footage, and it covers years. And to me, the interesting thing is their field people started out on larger cameras, but now they're migrating. And most of those field scientists that are out doing digs and things like that are capturing a lot of really interesting footage just on their phones. Can you talk to me about what you see happening, and whether there's a place for that kind of footage in these stock libraries coming up?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. And this is my iPhone. This is an iPhone Pro Max 13. I've been shooting professionally on this for 2 years now. And I'll tell you a story where, and I was almost from one day to the next. I did a 180, because people would ask me, can I shoot on mobile phones? And I would see how people would shoot, whether horizontally or vertically, and it would be really shaky, and they just didn't have the training. So I would say, no, it's not there yet. But then one day the quality was there if you knew what you're doing. You still need, some basic training. But I did a bunch of tests, and I was sending footage to my clients, showing them, like, this was shot on a phone, and it would blow their minds. They'd be like, wow, that's incredible. I had no idea that it could shoot this quality. This is leading up to the election in 2020. And my clients weren't into the idea of shooting on mobile. They were, broadcast traditionally, as opposed to change like that, for a variety of reasons, including, some good ones. But people were just prejudiced against mobile footage. That Saturday after the election, a lot of our clients had photographers out there covering the different rallies on that Saturday when Biden was announced as the winner. At that point, of course, they wanted footage. They wanted video footage from all this. So we got a ton of footage shot on DSLRs that was super shaky because they didn't have stabilization and stuff like that. And so that was the first moment I said, we could have had told them to shoot on mobile, and it would have been much better quality than this, just on the shakiness alone. But on January 6th, I basically did a primer for a bunch of photographers / videographers, prepping them for the rally that turned into, January 6th insurrection. Just best practices and shooting video and how to upload. And I said, look on the map, see where the local Starbucks is, because you're going to have to get to a Wi-Fi. You might have to get to a Wi-Fi hotspot to actually upload the footage to us. And when I saw the barricades being pushed over, I picked up the phone. I called my clients. I said, tell everybody to start shooting on their mobile devices. And that's what they did. They ended up thanking me later because we got a ton of footage out because of that. First of all, there was a safety issue for anybody with a big camera who looked like, a journalist or the press. They were beating people up. They were stabbing people and, they were destroying equipment. So that was kind of the game changer for my clients. They realized, okay, first of all, they saw the footage and the footage was great. We broke the story. This footage is going to be looked at, hopefully, for hundreds of years, let's preserve it. But this is historic footage. And so that really changed their thinking. And I've been involved with, globally, it's called MOJO, mobile journalism. And it's been around for a long time. It's been around for 10 years. So there's some people who've been doing this a long time. I've recently hopped on the bandwagon. And so I'm a huge fan. I just got back from a trip to Kiev last week where I was supplying journalists, video journalists. I brought a bunch of drones over and other gear. It was all mobile gear, essentially. So I supplied them, I trained them, and I shot a ton of footage. And you would never know that this was just shot on a mobile device. It's just video,
Yeah, that's the bottom line. It looks good, tells the story, and it's better to have that you can get high quality footage without taking those large rigs around. Just makes it potentially easier to get so much more stuff. That's great. We got a ton of questions coming up here, and I'm going to do the Q&A here with you. Sure. So our first one comes from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. And Chad says, what are the top 3 mistakes people make when submitting their work to Clippn?
Top 3 mistakes. You haven't shot long enough. So, as a shooter, when I shoot, if I'm totally focused. I love shooting. I love shooting B-roll. That's kind of my thing. But I'm so focused on what's happening. And if something really exciting happens, I know it. And you lose track of time. So you might think, oh, I shot for like 30 seconds. And then you go back and look at it, and it's like 2 or 3 seconds. And I pan from here to there, and then there's nothing. Like it's almost unusable. So I always tell people, count to 10 Mississippi in your head. You have to. If you're on a subject, start counting. And you have to do it. And I still do it to this day. I don't think it ever becomes really intuitive because of this weird time warp that happens. So start counting. And before you pan to somebody else, have a good 5 seconds, pan to that other person, count to 5 again. And then you've got a couple different shots. You've got a few different pieces there. So I'd say, having the footage long enough is probably the first thing. Second thing is coverage. Give people options, whatever you may be shooting, wides, mediums, and tights from different locations. I always try to plant my feet or tripod, wherever it is, 12 different places and do a wide, medium, and tight there. That's 36 shots, basically, maybe even more if I'm panning or something like that. That's a ton of footage. And if you've ever edited, we have this training video called Think Like an Editor, Shoot Like an Editor. Because if you've ever edited, you realize you'll never complain about having too much B-roll, really. It's just the opposite. You almost always never have enough. So if you shoot the most boring thing in the world, let's say me sitting here, could you cover this in a way where you actually have 12 different, places and wide, mediums, and tights? Absolutely. And you have to start thinking about it that way. You have to start getting creative. And then I guess the third mistake is, especially news, not giving real editorial captions. So news specification, and this is something that we constantly remind people. It gets better and better, but it's probably the number one pet peeve when news or editorial contributors upload to us. And just knowing that when this goes to a stock footage site, you need to know not only what are we looking at, like what's the story, right? You need a headline. Okay, what's a story? You need to say what's happening in the shot. But then the second sentence that you need in the description is, why is this news? Why is this news? What's the context, of this? I can shoot tanks in the square in Kiev. Okay, tanks in the square in Kiev. What's the context? We're approaching the first anniversary of the war when Russia invaded, something like that. Or the war has been ongoing since February 24th, blah, blah, blah. You have to give a context. And, the more information like that, that you give to Clippn, the less we have to guess, the less we have to do, which means that we can process it faster and we can start putting that time towards other things, which boosts quality, and speed to market. That's especially important with news.
Great. Let's check the next question out. It comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. And Roscoe says, office hours is big on AI. How is AI used to manage the media in your library? Or is it?
Yeah. So AI is, it's one of those things like mobile video. I've been saying, no, it's not there yet. And it's not there yet. One day I'm just going to say, yeah, it's there. Well, it pretty much is there right now, but it is a tool to assist our curators and taggers with tagging and keywording and things like that. It is becoming a very good tool for that. So I think we're going to start leaning on that more and more. But the thing with AI is to process footage. Let's say you have a library of 2 million clips. How do you actually run that through an AI system and with the different AI tags without getting too much? You can do object recognition and it'll tag every single thing in the frame. That's too much information, So it's finding that balance of really tuning the machine so that you get just as much information as you need. As I described before, you need to be able to search stuff a few different ways. But if there's too much metadata, it's almost as useless as having no metadata, because you're going to get results back for everything. So I would say, with AI, the opportunity for a company like Clippn is knowing how to use AI, knowing how to get 2 million clips through the AI, to run it through it, and to really manage the media and manage the project and get the tagging back to, let's say, a client MAM or wherever you're storing the footage, so that it's usable to you and of course usable to us as well.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating topic. I was just thinking the other day about whether or not, we have things like Midjourney for stills. Will we ever get to the point where an AI system can create some length of footage, give me a 10-second clip in the same kind of style and just creativity of the AI machines that will solve a need? Any thoughts on the long range?
You mean generating?
Yeah, generating some kind of footage. Maybe it won't be footage in terms of, we always think of footage as something from the real world. But if Midjourney can take some real portraits and then create something in the style of something else from that, you just wonder, will there ever be a technology that will be able to do that in contiguous footage?
Yes, absolutely. I see John nodding his head. I agree with you. Yeah, I think we're almost there, if not, there. Video is a lot more difficult than stills, because there's movement and there's intent and things like that you don't necessarily have in a still. Somebody throwing a ball, the machine knowing that the ball is moving forward for a reason and how it acts and stuff like that. So it's a lot more complicated, but you can see the leaps and bounds we've made in just a few years. So I'm confident that the quality of that will be there. Just right now, it's a huge discussion in the stills stock world about, first of all, these AI platforms were mining all these, actual stills that people own to train the machine. And, where's the compensation for that? That's never going to happen. There'll be lawsuits and they'll never be compensated for that.
We were talking about that yesterday. There's one right now out of San Francisco that's big.
Yeah. But then the next thing is, creating a shot, putting in exactly what you want, a certain type of person, and then you get this shot that is actually usable. There's a little bit of that uncanny valley still there where you kind of know, like they've got 14 fingers and stuff like that. That's going to be cleared up pretty quick. It's the technology is amazing. So I think, it will be just another tool. I mean, it is another tool. People will be really excited about it. It'll be really trendy. But actual footage there will always be a place for, real footage, real shot footage. And especially with news. I mean, this is sorry, Roscoe, I'm going on tangents here. I think I answered that question. I was gonna say that there's another big issue with video that is, provenance. I talk a lot about Ukraine just because it's a big story right now, but also for video. I don't know the exact statistic, but I'm gonna make one up, and it's probably not too far off. But every day, there's more video shot of the Ukrainian war than all other wars combined, right? It's like something like that. Maybe it's every week, but it's something like that. There's so much video coming out. And in the early days of the war, there were a lot of deep fakes or a lot of misleading footage. So media organizations spent a lot of money trying to verify this, geolocation and stuff like that. So provenance for stills and for video is a really, really big thing. And there's something called the Content Authenticity Initiative, which is from Adobe, and a lot of all the top media companies are signing on board, including Clippn. But that's really to bake in certain standards and protocols and even tools, so that when you shoot an image, and eventually it's going to be video as well, and then that gets edited, and then it gets cropped, and then it gets flipped, and then it gets posted, that when you finally click on the LA Times for this video or for this still, there's a little eye on the upper corner, and that gives you all the information. So you know who shot it, when, where, and every step of the way through editing to where it got to you. So that's a type of tool that that media companies are planning to bake into their products and workflows, so that people will have more confidence in the footage that they're looking at. And this is preparing us for that, for the day when, that uncanny valley is removed, and we won't be able to tell the difference between an AI generated image or video from something that's actually shot.
That's very cool. Embedded provenance of a sort. Chris Fenwick has a thought here.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, Mick, first of all, check your email. I sent you a message through the message in your website thing.
Cool.
Second of all, we're already to the point where we're making images that can't be distinguished from reality, but only in the thumbnails. I can't tell you this multiple times. I've tried to buy a clip on a stock footage library, and I've literally bought it, and I was like, oh, that's animated. Foiled again. The thumbnail was pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm with you on the phone thing. I've been saying for at least a decade now that the iPhone was going to be the greatest camera ever invented, and I think it is. I really do think it is. And I'll tell you the thing that fascinates me the most, and the first time I saw this, a little bit of brain matter splattered all over the room. Not only can I search my photos library using words, ostensibly keywords that I did not attach to a photo.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if I search for dog, I'm going to find a bunch of pictures of my wife's dogs. But the one that blew me away was that one time I was showing it to somebody, and I was like, wait a second, that's a video.
Hmm.
And I opened up the video and I hit play, and I was like, wow, there's no dog in this. Sure enough, a few seconds into it, dog runs through the frame.
Wow. Yeah.
It's not looking at the thumbnail of it. It's looking at the whole video.
It's scanning the whole thing. Yeah. Wow.
It's totally amazing. And I think that when you can somehow capture that kind of technology for your tagging business, that's going to be huge. Because you're right.
Mm-hmm.
As an editor, I mean, I've been editing for decades, and the number one curse of every editor is, can I find? Not do I have that shot, but I've seen that shot.
Yeah.
And I can't find it now.
Yeah.
And so to be able to search something as smart as my iPhone does, the iPhone is the best camera. It will go down as the best camera ever made. I don't care about all the ARIs and 6K this and whatever. The iPhone is the best camera ever made, period.
John Preto had a thought. John?
Hey, Mick, thanks for coming on and sharing with us. I appreciate it. I'm a student of AI. I've been watching it for a long time and waiting for Adobe to launch their stuff. I'm starting to see guys take Midjourney or Stable Diffusion now and do tweening with characters. So that they're creating two characters and they're tweening between to create video. But we're hearing the rumors that generative stuff's going to show up in Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, and Premiere, and so you're going to be able to animate directly in there, 3D, video, audio, and of course already still images. So it's exciting stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. We've got way more questions than I expected, and they're coming in hard and fast. So let's get through some of them. Tommy Shantz in St. Paul says, what format is needed? Is H.264 good enough?
Yes, it is. A lot of our videographers, again, not just the stock footage, but the news photographers, shoot H.264. That's fine. H.264, H.265. If you can shoot ProRes, that would be great. But that's a big calculation, and sometimes it's really the diminishing returns. Those are huge files, and it may not be practical for you to shoot, and it may not matter. So H.264 is perfectly fine now. Yeah.
Alton Christensen's up next from New York City, and Alton says, I shoot time lapse in RAW, which has many color grading options. Is there an option to customize the color treatment of these sorts of source material for a client, and how might that work in your environment?
Yeah, so with RAW, so think of it this way. As you're searching through the stock footage site and you see that thumbnail, right? You may be a total pro. You may be a professional editor or color grader or producer or whatever. Even though you're a professional, there's something about seeing ungraded footage where you just kind of skip over it. So we do basic grading so that it's pleasing to the eye, and that a potential buyer would look at that footage, know what it is, not be prejudiced against it because it's ungraded, but then think, oh, I can do something with this. So if you shoot RAW, that's fine. We would take that and we would basically put a basic grade on it. Just again, minimal standards, just so it looks good to our eye, and we know that someone looking over it will know that that they'll be able to do something to it. Sometimes they do request the actual RAW files, and we're able to provide that.
You say basic grading. I also saw, I was reading through some of the material about you, that there's transcoding built in. If you upload something, that people who are looking for footage can get transcodes and different encodings.
Yeah. So, we always start with who's the end user, where is this going? For kind of our enterprise news business, which is really just, virtual post-production. We take a look at, what format do they want it in? One client wants MXF files for whatever reason. That's what they take. Okay. That's what we give them. We'll master at certain format, certain resolution. We'll give them whatever spec they want. But at the same time, we'll send maybe the ProRes 422 HQ to Getty Images. From Getty, if somebody wants to license that footage, then Getty basically handles the transcoding. But one of the reasons that we're in the cloud and we went to the cloud, super early, is because we can drop something essentially into a watch folder in AWS Elemental, and it spits out the other side in whatever flavor and format we want immediately without us having to invest in extra hardware. It's super fast and the quality is excellent.
Cool. Next question from Eric Billings in Washington, D.C. What's your favorite stabilizing gimbal for the iPhone?
Oh, man. Okay. So, I mean, the DJI, they keep changing the name. So it was an Osmo and then it was an OM. I don't know what the latest one is. I think it's an Osmo 6 and the last one was OM 5. But basically, and that's actually one of the things I brought over to Ukraine to give to their, to give to journalists there. I really like that. Though the last version, the version 5, wasn't so great for the Pro Max weight for some reason. But the new one, they have addressed that. Yeah, I would go for DJI for a phone. The other reason is with the clip that actually holds the device to the handheld gimbal, you can buy one with little lights on it, which is actually great for if you're a journalist and and anybody who's basically doing a selfie walking down the street. It's actually a little light on your face too. They're $150. I'm not a salesman for DJI, but they're $150 from B&H. Super cheap. It actually extends. You can flip it upside down and chase your dog around the yard and stuff like that. I've been using those for years and I absolutely love them.
Great. Next question comes from Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin. Do you look at videos and suggest the creator, hey, that could work as vertical video, and how much vertical video is being created? We normally stay away from religion on this show, but we're going to go there now.
Oh,
vertical
man.
Video.
Well, I'll crack I'm sure this joke is really old and tired at this point, but how do you prove that you're old? Right? Everybody's shooting like this these days. Everybody's shooting like this. And come on, I've been shooting horizontally for so long that it's a little hard for me to wrap my head around vertical unless it's specific for social. But social is most of what the consumption is these days. And
are you seeing a need in stock for vertical? Do people ask for it?
There is more and more. Yeah, there is more and more. Yeah. So it's kind of its own genre, but it really shouldn't be, because it's everywhere. So I think part of it is that the people who shoot vertically, maybe they're not big consumers of stock footage. It's a different type of, footage. So maybe they're not consuming it that much, but it is there. There is a need for it. I would say, I shot something recently that was going to go out two different ways. One was kind of like a broadcast format. So it was traditional, horizontal, but then they also wanted to do social stuff. So, it's almost going back to the days of having to put tape on the viewfinder,
Give yourself a new framing guide
and shoot it both ways, and know to keep them in the middle, and know that in post-production, you're going to have to flip it, shoot in 4K. That gives you more options, but I would think of, where is this going to be airing, or where are you going to be distributing it, and let that be your guide.
I actually had a project where the client asked me for the footage in both things. So I tried it with a dual bracket, mounting one phone horizontally and one phone vertically. And it was a weird mental exercise to keep looking back and forth and trying to figure out, what's my framing supposed to be? If this shot starts to the left and I'm trying to get a good shot, so pre-roll beforehand, and then the move, going back and forth between a vertical framing and a horizontal framing to execute a move and end and stay on it was a mental process.
Yeah. There's some pretty cool things. They're pretty cool. The Mojo apps, for video. One, the leading camera app is Filmic Pro, which is just incredible. That's what I was shooting mostly in Ukraine. There are some apps that do things like shoot two shots at the same time. So on a camera with 3 different lenses, it'll shoot a wide and a close up at the same time. So you'll actually get those 2 files. I've been thinking recently, if anybody wants to start a new business with me, a new app of shooting 2 files, but like horizontal and vertical at the same time. I don't even know if that's possible, but I've been thinking, like, could you do that from the same lens on a mobile device? Because that's a type of thing where you wouldn't have to have 2 cameras. You wouldn't have to worry about it really. And you would have, you'd have both files from a single shot, a single device.
Interesting to think about as we move forward. Next question comes from Alton Christensen in New York City, and he says, how are you dealing with the various delivery formats, HDR, HLG, 60 frame per second, 120 frame per second, 4K, 8K? Do I deliver variations on each clip, or is that an automated process? And a 1080p of a 4K clip, maybe?
1080p 4K clip. Okay. So again, think of the end user, the potential end user. If you're shooting just for stock footage, I like shooting, 4K 30p is really, really safe. You want to do 4K 60p, that's fine. But 4K 30p is fine unless you want to do, essentially like a slow-mo type, effect, which is people shoot that way. When you upload, you can give us an idea of like why you shot it a certain way. And like I was shooting this for slow-mo or something like that, because it's not always obvious. So people shoot 60p for, like regular speed. But if you were thinking having it a little slowed down, then we'll know that. And then we'll edit that accordingly. There's no right or wrong answer for any of those formats you said, except, if you can shoot in 4K, don't shoot it in 1080 because you are broadening your audience by shooting 4K. In many instances, the stock footage distributors, they actually charge more for 4K. Not all of them do, but they charge more for 4K, and it's a huge demand. So if you've only shot in 1080, then you're losing your 4K audience. If you shoot in 4K, you got a 4K audience. Maybe you've got a premium for that footage, and you still have your 1080 audience. And longevity too. What is the shelf life of these clips? Depending on the subject matter, if there's any fashion involved, maybe you got 5-6 years or something like that, unless someone wants kind of an archival type shot. But it's shorter. But if it's something that is more timeless, the higher resolution is actually important because people are trending towards higher and higher resolutions. And eventually when 8K, is really the standard, well, then they can still use 4K, but, 1080 is going to look terrible. So you're just not going to, you're not going to have buyers for that. The idea with stock footage, if we're talking about that as a business, think of it as an annuity. You're building a pile of footage that should kick off an annuity year after year after year. Once you build that critical mass, you got to keep feeding it. But that's the idea of stock footage, that you want it up there. You only have to process it once, and it stays on these sites forever, basically, and with potential buyers.
Yeah, I had a consultant once talk to me about pigs, passive income generators. We did the work once, and it just keeps paying you over and over and over again. Next question comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. And Roscoe says, what clients other than news benefit most from a shortened time to market?
I think news is the primary one. Speed to market is really, really, really important for news. But I'm kind of a workflow. I'm obsessed with friction points and workflows. Like that's my thing. Like everything I do, from production through post-production and distribution. As an editor, I don't like looking for footage. My happy place is actually getting to the point where I'm editing. And since there are humans involved in the workflow, we're very, very conscious of keeping people in their happy spots and keeping the technology out of the way. So while speed to market might not be the most important thing for some commercial stock footage clip that you shot, the efficiency of speed to market is really, really important for you, but also for us, because that helps you just focus on shooting what you love, shooting what you want to focus, what you want to do. And for us, the more efficient we are, we can do it faster, we can do it for lower cost, and actually we can add quality to other things that are really, really important.
Speaking of the choir with me, the very first thing I have clients doing on that natural history project I'm talking to you about, the first 3 days that we went through the footage, all we did was reject. We just went in Final Cut and rejected huge swaths.
Yeah.
Everything that was talking head, we rejected because we're looking for B-roll for the client forever. And just getting rid of junk was the most efficient thing we could do. And now we're keywording what's left. It's made a big difference.
Yeah, it's good to do that first pass, just so you can focus.
Focus is what it's all about. Next question comes from Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin. And he says, any calls for LiDAR created content for gaming or the metaverse?
Not that I know of. I haven't, that kind of falls into the 360 category where, in my experience, people who are using that footage typically just shoot it themselves. It's so super specific. That may change, but I haven't heard any demands for that. Not yet.
Are there changes in, you have a big view of the industry. Are there changes with what people are asking for or searching for within your system that you've been able to identify? Is there a kind of footage they're more interested in right now?
Yeah, there's stylistic differences for sure. In the old days, stock footage was kind of a dirty word. I spent years in agencies, and you'd go to stock footage if you needed like a military plane or something like that, or if you didn't have a big budget, you were putting together a sizzle video or something like that. I mean, picture the two people standing awkwardly at the water cooler in an office. That kind of is what stock footage had the reputation of that. We started Clippn when DSLRs were really coming up. That was the game changer in the industry. And I looked around and saw the types of footage, and it was kind of stale type footage. Because of DSLRs, I think the footage has become, not only better in some ways or more cinematic, but a lot more dynamic. And I think that's continuing with mobile. So I think the style of shooting is the thing that has changed the most.
Yeah, that comports with what I've seen, which is in the beginning when shooters were just the news folks, they all shot like news folks, but then we saw more different kinds of things showing up on YouTube and everywhere else. And it seemed like it freed people to really be more artistic in their approach to executing shots. And so sometimes I look at stock libraries now and I go, well, that really is pretty. That's really well done. That is way elevated beyond what I saw in my first 5 or 10 years in the business. So
yeah, artistic and also intimate. I think it can be a little more intimate. And also another thing, this goes back to, mobile video, but access. And I'm not talking about sneaking in someplace and shooting where you shouldn't be shooting, but everybody has their phones up. Everybody's shooting at all times. So we're not on guard when we see that. And I think it enables you to get access, but there's also a certain intimacy there that you can achieve with a mobile device that you can't with a big rig that's a little more intimidating for people.
Yeah, actually, I have an old thing that I was thinking about metadata when I was talking to Phil Hodges, a friend of mine who's really steeped in that metadata and taught me a lot, and I know about it. And in just thinking about it, I thought, yeah, there's going to be a concert somewhere where something weird happens, and there's going to be 100 or 200 or 800 video clips come out of that. And without metadata and the understanding of how to deploy it and leverage it for success, how are you going to know what your good shots are out of 800 submissions from an event?
So this is a really good point. And what concerns me right now, so I'm on a mission. Like I say, I mean, I want every clip, every frame saved and searchable and used. I mean, I absolutely love footage. And, I hear the stories of, these local news affiliates just dumping truckloads of their tapes and destroying them. And, we know from the past year, I don't know if you heard this story in Minneapolis, the local station saved their footage and they digitized it and they're going through it. Now, when a news organization or a media company does that, they get to tell history. They get to say what history is. If you dump it, you don't have that chance. And an archivist was going through the footage, and this is from the 70s, and they saw this little boy on a field trip. The camera person who was interviewing kids on a field trip, and the little boy looked really familiar. And when he started talking, it confirmed, oh, that was Prince. That's 11-year-old Prince on a field trip. And there are so many examples and so many moments about that. So I absolutely love footage and, archival and the new footage. And what concerns me is, workflows right now where there is footage being captured and maybe it's uploaded to YouTube, maybe it's uploaded to TikTok or Twitter, and it gets compressed. So it's shot nice, high resolution, nice and clear. You can see it on your phone at least, but then it gets compressed and then it gets reposted and recompressed. And so we've all seen, on social, especially, we've all seen that footage that just looks really, really terrible. The reason is it wasn't captured like that. It was just recompressed and recompressed. So where is that source footage? Where is that being stored? Where will that be accessible? And there's so much of it. So that's where, the machines are going to help us. But I think we have to, especially since the move from tape to digital, that's really happened the last, 10, 12 years with, on the highest levels. There's a mountain of footage, and where is it? And how are we going to preserve it? How are we going to make it accessible and be able to pass it on? That's a big issue right now.
Big issue. Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael here. And Douglas says, you mentioned supporting raw red camera files as the high watermark. What camera would you suggest as an entry-level camera for professionals who want to start in the industry?
There's so many. And every day I'll give you, a different answer. The big one a decade ago was, the Canon 5D. That was kind of the game changer.
Changed my entire career. That 5D Mark II switched my entire thinking.
That was exactly it. And again, in some ways we've been real cutting edge or bleeding edge with Clippn, really pushing the envelope on what we can do in AWS and the platform and stuff like that. When we were building our platform, we went to AWS and said, okay, this is what we want to do. We want to edit in the cloud. We want to put MAM in the cloud. We want to do all this stuff. And they said, we can't do that yet. We're not there yet. And we did it. We pushed it. But when it comes to, tools of the trade, I am super conservative. I take forever just because I've seen the promises of technology and had my heart broken so many times that I usually am kind of like, okay, let's wait to see. So it took me a couple of years to really convert to DSLRs. And once I did, of course, I was all in and I built this business, around it. But anyway, Sony is excellent. Panasonic, Canon still, the cool thing about, I still refer to them as DSLRs, but they're not even SLRs anymore. They call them mirrorless cameras, which sounds like, horseless carriages, but they're mirrorless. The cool thing about the new cameras is that, without that mirror, you can do things like autofocus on video, tracking, facial recognition in the sense that it knows that their face is on camera, so to keep those in focus and stuff like that. I've had my eye on the Sony FX30, which is their Super 35 sensor camera, which is just came out in the past, 6 months. That's what I'm looking at right now. But look at the body, look at what your price point is, and get decent lenses that operate in low light.
Absolutely. Mick Reed, it has been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for bringing into our world Clippn. I think everybody has learned a ton about it. And I think it was just a good philosophical conversation today, too, about where things are going, why they're going to be what they're going to be. Do you have any last thought you want to leave us with before we switch to our closing credits?
Just keep shooting. Everybody keep shooting. Count to 10 Mississippi in your head when you're shooting. Get a good 10 seconds for every shot.
Perfect. Thanks so
much.
You'll
go far. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Let's see. I've got a few little things to do. And don't forget Thursday today, a little later on, I believe it's Isadora Lab with L. Wilson Spiro. The accessibility, I wanted to mention this, even though it's on Wednesdays, it'll be a week from now, but don't forget there's now an accessibility lab with Laura Thompson that we're doing. So another piece of content that you want to deal with. I want to thank particularly everybody who has been involved in this show. There are two groups we thank every day, and that's because they're incredibly important to how this runs. This is a participant-driven show. So all of our producers, the people who submitted the questions that we handled today, without you, this is impossible for us to get done. Also, to the panelists, everybody who came in as a panelist answered the first hour questions. We want to say a big thanks to Mick, our guest today, of course. And then the final group is everybody in the back end. There's a tremendous number of people who work the back end every day to make this possible. We're going to roll the credits for them right now. Pay attention to some of these names. Thank you for joining us for Office Hours today. Hi, Asma. Good to see you.